Please welcome to the stage, Amy Robertson.
I feel like that was a little bit weak, but I'm going to let it pass. Okay, so we have all copied and pasted something that we should not have. And our next speaker is here to talk about the people that do it with malware, which I'm sure no one here has ever done. So Steph Rand is a senior intelligence analyst at Red Canary, and her research on the ClickFix campaign helped define one of our techniques in attack, user execution, malicious copy and paste. Please welcome Steph.
Yeah, it's been an awesome day. All right, we're going to get into some nerdy weeds, which I am sure is very familiar territory for most of the folks gathered here. So welcome to Paste and Rundown, Tracking and Clustering ClickFix Campaigns. I am Steph. As mentioned, I'm a senior intelligence analyst at Red Canary. I've been there for a little over 3 years. Before that, I did 2 years in digital forensics and incident response at Mandiant. I would like to throw up latest favorite hobby. Jigsaw puzzles is my current way of, thanks to Lillian for mentioning, unplugging, unwinding, being a little bit more mindful. It's super fun. So today, first of all, what is Paste and Run? Brian did a great job of giving a quick overview, and I will also give a quick overview, because what I really want to talk about is some of the challenges we faced tracking this threat at the Red Canary intelligence team, because it was interesting, especially, well, we'll get into it. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how leveraging the new malicious copy and paste sub-technique helped us out. And then we'll have some brief findings, detection opportunities. We'll see if we have time for questions. We may not, but if not, I will be around today, tomorrow, and also in Slack. So what is Paste and Run? Paste and Run is a popular initial access technique that tricks users into copying, pasting, and executing malicious PowerShell code. You've probably also heard of it called ClickFix or fakeCAPTCHA. There's different kinds of lures, which is why we have different names. So the first lure that appeared on the scene was tricking users into fixing their access to, say, a document or a web page. The other kind of lure that is also very popular is prove that you're a human. So we have these fake CAPTCHA challenges. It's delivered in a ton of different ways. So we've got phishing emails, malvertising, web injects, malicious Discord links. It's really surprising how many ways adversaries are putting these lures in front of users. Here's an example. I know this is tiny text, but I wanted to put up some kind of example to show you what one of these lures and landing pages looks like. I will go into more detail on what this is doing, but this is sort of what you'd see. You'd see a Cloudflare challenge asking someone to verify that they are a human. So what happens is the user will interact with the lure. Sometimes that is what silently copies the PowerShell command to the clipboard. The previous lure, if you take a look, I don't know if you can see it, it actually just says copy. It says click this button and copy this. It's usually not that overt, but sometimes it is. Users will be prompted to press the Windows R button, or sometimes Windows X, which also runs the Windows Run dialog, but without the Run MRU key created. So it's even sneakier. They will prompt users to press Control and V to paste the copied PowerShell command, prompt them to press Enter, and then the command will reach out and download the next stage or the payload. This has proven to be wildly successful and shows no signs of slowing down yet. So why was this a struggle? What were some of our challenges? Well, when it first came out, when Proofpoint first reported on this in March of 2024, they reported in use by TA571, an initial access broker, and ClearFake. So initially we're like, oh, we're going to track this as groups and adversaries. That's not ideal because we have to depend on OSINT. Red Canary is an endpoint company for the most part, and so we see endpoint data. So we really have to leverage our friends who can have better visibility into initial access campaigns to make certain associations and attributions. Also, this technique has been adopted by so many adversaries. So that's a little tricky. We could track where the lures and payloads are hosted, right? We have IP addresses, we have domains. That's nice because they're concrete IOCs, and they're also adversary agnostic to a certain degree. However, again, they can change quickly. Not that the infrastructure changes quickly, but the commands and the IP addresses and domains used in those commands change quickly, and that's what we can see, right? That's that first behavioral execution on the endpoint. So it's a little bit more brittle for our tracking purposes. We can track the payloads. We can see that on the endpoint. So payloads are something that we do track, and we're less dependent on OSINT, although we do still leverage it to figure out what payloads are. The disadvantages of this are there are so many payloads. Dozens, at least a couple dozen at this point. It is impressive the number of payloads and other threats we've seen used alongside paste and run. What if we don't know what the payload is? How are we going to track it if we're just looking at payloads? And what if the payload's not delivered? We track it as precursor activity in that case, but still. And then lastly, we can create Red Canary clusters. So we can create our own clusters based on what we're seeing, which is useful. It means if we see something new or different, we can identify it as new or different. That's how we created Mocha Mannequin, one of our color birds, and Node and MITRE ATT&CK, which is a piece of malware that they use. But again, you get into this potentially innumerable clusters based on the groups that are using this technique. So what was our solution? How do we start tracking this at Red Canary? We did all of it. We did everything. We did all of that. We associated to adversaries and groups where we could. We tracked infrastructure, payloads, created a lot of internal clusters. We also created our own internal technique tag in Synapse, which we tracked as a capability and called it paste and run. So tracking it in this many ways means it's well tracked and accurately tracked at Red Canary, but it's really hard to aggregate, right? It's really hard to look at this data over time. Enter, and it should say April of 2025, but enter this new sub-technique for user execution, enter 0.004 malicious copy and paste, which is great. It gave us another way of categorizing and organizing this activity across time. And MITRE ATT&CK is integrated with a lot of the other things that we use. So this was very exciting. So we organized the data in Vertex Synapse, which we use to sort of level up our investigations on the Intel team. I will not go into great detail, but for those of you who are also Vertex Synapse nerds, this is the kind of process that we went through. And what did we learn before we went? So this is actual graphs I pulled out. So this is our internal tag, payloads, internal clusters. We've got all these different pieces of data. And now we had one data set to rule them all, which means we can answer questions much more easily. For example, what threats have we seen alongside paste and run in the last 3 months? So this is up-to-date data for the practitioners here, also just because it's interesting to see. We're seeing a lot more Net Support Manager than we did earlier in the year. We are seeing Luma C2, which did reappear on the scene after the takedown this May. We're also seeing Latrodectus, Scarlet Goldfinch, which is fakeSG, is another name for that, and Rhadamanthus to round out our top 5. But we can answer these questions now for ourselves and our customers much more easily. We could do it before, but as an analyst, it's so nice to just be able to query this one data set. We can also answer questions like, how has it changed over time much more easily? I will not get into all of the details for all of the changes that we have seen, but I could answer that question, which is a wonderful thing. And that's the part of the work that I love the best, is taking all of this data and making it actually usable and really practical. All right, I'm going to give you all a couple of detection opportunities. I've talked to some detection engineers today, and so I'm sure none of this will surprise you. As Brian was talking about, these aren't new, but they are effective, and we see this all the time with paste and run. So this is one great option. We see PowerShell with invoke expression. This is another great option. We see a lot of MSHTA, a lot of MITRE making external network connections. It ought not to do that in most cases. So that is another really good detection opportunity for paste and run. I wanted to offer a couple of mitigation suggestions just very quickly. User education, disallowing access to the Windows Run dialog or disabling some or all auto hotkeys is an option. And this is a little spicier. You could disable cmd.exe and PowerShell execution for standard users. This might be a little trickier to implement, but it's a possibility. It's something to consider. All right, so that's a lot. Let's do a quick recap. What did we talk about today? So paste and run, aka ClickFix, fakeCAPTCHA, is a very popular initial access technique. There's a lot of different ways to track this activity, which made it challenging to decide how to track it, especially early on as our understanding of it was changing. One of our lessons learned is it was wonderful that we got this malicious copy and paste sub-technique to leverage, but it's really hard for all of the wonderful folks here at MITRE to keep up with everything that adversaries do. And I think next time we would leverage our internal technique tag a little bit earlier and lean on that a lot harder, which makes it even easier to put under a new MITRE technique category if and when that comes out later on. And then I shared some very brief findings and detection opportunities based on what we've seen at Red Canary. And that is all the content I have for you today. I know that we might not have a whole lot of extra time for questions, but I will be in the Slack channel. I will be here the rest of the day and tomorrow. And if we do have questions, I am very happy to answer questions.
Steph has very kindly already seeded her Slack channel to welcome your questions on this. Thank you very much, Steph.
Yeah, happy to.
Thank you for this talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.